OK, over to your questions. And you mentioned transport being a massive part of what you do and what people want, and it is something that does affect everyone. So we could have filled an hour with transport questions. We've got a couple. Gregg Blenkinsop. Where's Greg? Hiya, Greg. The mic's coming up to you. There you are.
Cheers. Is there any long-term scope in the North East for prioritising pedestrians and cyclists over cars in large areas of a city, perhaps similar to Amsterdam? I regularly use the electric scooters that are available to rent to get around Newcastle, and I'd love to see further investment into bike lanes to make this environmentally friendly form of transport safer. Perhaps even a similar scheme to Boris bikes in London, but with electric bikes, could be on the cards. Cheers.
And that we do have a couple. We just hold that one? We'll definitely come back to it, and if Jamie misses any of the bits, I'll remind him. But also we've got Kai Kozanek, who's online, who's going to ask a question as well on this. So hello, Kai. Or should I read this out? Here we go. Do you think you've done enough to champion active travel in the North East? Looking around, you can see there's a disjointed cycle network, to name a couple, the routes connecting Tynemouth to Newcastle directly, or Newcastle and the Metro Centre. Some good infrastructure, but separated by many dangerous roads and crossings, some of what you said. And the pavements aren't much better for walking, especially in new neighbourhoods. There are cars parked on pavements, blocking access for pedestrians, all areas of the North East. Ambitious plans like pedestrianising Blackett Street in Newcastle being shelved. Have you done enough to champion active travel and the health and the environmental benefits that it brings across the region?
They're two very good questions, Greg and Kai. So there's a lot of individual questions in there, but directly to Kai, I gave up owning a car. I get around only using public transport and my bike. And for a politician in a fairly senior position who only does that...
The mayor doesn't have a car?
There is no mayoral car.
There's no mayoral car?
No, yeah. Not in the combined authority. We have no vehicle fleet. If the staff team are using it or need to get somewhere, we have an arrangement with a hire car company, and where possible, we get zero emissions vehicles. If you're going into rural Northumberland, that's not always possible. And I personally don't at all. So it gives people... So there was one place, so the Great Wall of Scotswood, for those who know it, there's a massive retaining wall. It's monumental. I think you can see it from space, that we created so we can build a load of affordable houses. And I was going to visit that, and my PA was talking to the site manager, and he says, don't worry, we've got a space for the mayor's limo to park, where there's no screws or nails so that the tyres will be fine. And she says, that's very nice. Is there anywhere he can chain his bike? And you turn up somewhere in your mayoral gear with a suit and tie on a bike, and people, but you know. So I think that sort of personal leadership really counts. And does it necessarily change everyone's behaviour? Of course it doesn't. Now what we've got to bear in mind is at the moment the cycle networks and the walking networks are the functions of the local authorities, and as we said at the beginning, they are in charge of that, and I'm not at this time. But once we move to the integrated transport system and the plans from May next year, the mayor does set the transport plan, and the mayor does, not the combined authority. So you need absolutely the right mayor who gets this. And not only who gets it and believes in it, but has the ability to deliver serious heavyweight projects, because it doesn't necessarily come with all the money you would like. So when we talk about the things that make a difference to cycling and walking, yes, it's the cycle lanes. And I have cycled fairly recently, like just a couple of weeks ago, from where I live in South Gosforth to Tynemouth for a meeting.
Mentioned, yeah.
And there's some lovely sections of cycleway, and there's some fairly rough sections of cycleway through your rough ground and trees, and I've got a big mountain bike and all the rest of it, and I love that. Not everyone perhaps does. And then there's a huge section along the coast road. And it's sort of fast, but you've got to keep stopping and crossing potentially dangerous junctions. Now, I think I'm all right, but I'm not sure that a few years ago I'd let my kids do that. So they're quite right, it does need to be better integrated. But there's other things that put people off. Number one is you're worried you're going to get your bike nicked. If you've got an expensive bike, you're not going to park it in town and chain it up and leave it for long. Or if you do, it might not be there when you come back. So we need much more. We need to deal with crime far, far better than we do. But we need secure bike lockers. Most public transport interchanges would help. So you can do what's called multimodal travel, bike to and from the station, but if it's a longer journey, you might use the metro or a train or a long-distance bus route to cover that part of it. And then there's other ways that the funding at the moment is often tied to what's called street furniture or design of physical infrastructure. But if you're working I work in quite a nice office building, and there's showers and secure bike parking. But if you're, serving someone in a restaurant, or you're, working in Gregg's, you don't really want to be a bit whiffy.
No, no.
And you might get spoken to if you were. So we should be allowing some of this to help with things like showers and changing rooms.
And the bike schemes that have come and gone, I can think of at least two, the green bikes and the orange e-scooters, they seem to have worked. I don't think they worked in Sunderland. But what would you suggest, a model similar to London or elsewhere in Europe, any that you're aware of that would work here for us?
The most important thing on transport is integration. If you need a separate app for each different bus company, a separate app for the bike hire, you get the idea, and you've got to buy a ticket for one, and then you've got to hire. It quickly mounts up. It's confusing. You're never going to get people who are used to the car to think, you know what, I'll just go into town and see my mates using public transport tonight. If they're used to driving, they'll just book a taxi if they can afford it, or miss out otherwise. Whereas we know from city after city that if you get the whole thing on a single integrated system where you can buy one ticket, or better still, have an app and a public transport account, and then you can start to do clever things like, well, all right, every time you park, you've got to pay for the parking, but we'll give you a little bit of credit on your public transport account so that, people think, I've got 80 quid saved up on that. You know what, I will leave the car at home today. And then once you've overcome that psychological barrier the first time, and you're starting to think, you know what, that was a lot more pleasant and easier than I thought it would be. That's how we get the shift. So metro, buses, heavy rail, the rail network, integrated bike hire, and car clubs is the missing bit. Because for those who don't know, there are car clubs out there. They're not on a big enough scale that everyone can access them. And if the nearest one is 2 miles from your home, it's no good. But you can hire these things for £5 an hour. It's commercially viable to do it at that stage. We can certainly do it as a public system. And we know that once you integrate public transport, you get anything up to a 40% immediate increase in the amount of people using it. And over time that grows. The Tyne and Metro had twice as many people using it before 1986 when it was integrated, despite having a smaller network, didn't go to South Hilton or the airport then, than it does now. You get more people using it, you've got more money to spend on it, and it's about getting that phasing right, about growing the network, getting the money in, and that means getting the capital in to grow it, and I'm already in negotiations with big pension funds. This is our money, pension funds. You're not talking about, tax dodging people in the Cayman Islands. This is our money invested here to give us a better transport system, going back into the pockets of us as pensioners in time. So that's the way we get it. And that sudden increase in a better system is how you persuade people that the climate emergency, their own fitness, and self-interest, who wants to be stuck in traffic jams?
Yeah.
Then that's the way we do this. I think that's a really strong vision.
Great.